there are legitimate reasons why prescription diets for specific medical conditions should not be fed to healthy animals. Unfortunately, for many pet owners, they will feed other pets in the home the same prescription diet for convenience. If you're putting out a bowl of dry prescription food and that pet is not allowed to eat anything else, supposedly, according to your veterinarian, and you have another pet in the house, you're just going to put out the same food if you're feeding dry food and leaving it out because you don't want the one that needs the prescription to eat the non-prescription food. So your other animal is now eating the prescription diet. Well, what if your animal that's on the prescription diet is on a very, very low protein diet? It's an old animal with kidney disease, prescribed a low protein diet. Your other animal happens to be a young growing puppy, and you put out one dry food that's low in protein, low in phosphorus. Not good for the puppy. This becomes so confusing for pet owners because it's just difficult to navigate and you don't have enough information. Every prescription medication comes with an insert that details potential risks and side effects. The problem is, most pet lovers never see that insert or are even informed of any potential risks before use. Whether you ultimately decide to use these medications, alternatives, or a combination of the two is your choice to make. The goal of this video is not to spread fear, but to educate and empower pet parents so you can ask informed questions and make the best decisions for your own pet. Here's the deal. I'm going to read a whole bunch of stuff here. I've got about 15 pages of highlights here and there. And at the end, I'm going to use something from Truth About Pet Food. So I will announce when I'm using that. And that is from Susan Thixton, who is just our hero in helping us understand the regulations and the nuances and the corruption, frankly, in the pet food industry. Okay, so therapeutic diet manufacturers require a veterinarian's prescription to purchase pet foods that are considered prescription or therapeutic, but they don't have to prove that those diets are safe and effective. Pet food manufacturers were able to usurp the term prescription literally as a marketing tool. It's confusing to pet owners and veterinarians when something that doesn't legally require a prescription goes by the name prescription, and your veterinarian and the manufacturer say that you have to have a prescription. It's unfair that a legitimate legal term that denotes drug safety and efficacy has been corrupted by pet food manufacturers in the service of their brand's bottom line. Therapeutic, aka prescription foods, are ubiquitous in veterinary medicine. Every veterinary practice pretty much uses them, unless you are lucky enough to have a holistic veterinarian who will help you make diets for your pet to support whatever issues they have going on. But the prescription foods in veterinary medicine are designed to address everything from renal failure and gastrointestinal sensitivity to allergic skin disease, liver disorders, geriatrics, mobility, brain health, you name it. They're making them for everything. When these products were developed in the 1970s and 80s, they were initially marketed as prescription diets by Hill's Pet Food Company. The idea was that these foods were not only more scientifically advanced, but that they were tailored for specific illnesses and were not considered appropriate for healthy pets. That's how they began way back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And consequently, they were marketed exclusively through veterinarians to ensure that a veterinarian would be in charge of monitoring a pet's response to the restricted diet, and that the pet food company also had a vet's expert recommendation, which is a prized commodity. This arrangement also provided a veterinary hospital with a secure source of significant profits. When clients began asking to purchase these foods from other sources, manufacturers began to require written prescriptions. Fast forward 20 or 30 years, and greater competition in the pet food market means expanded distribution online and through big box retailers. The concession to the veterinarians who were unhappy with the competition was to continue to require prescriptions. So you had to go to your veterinarian in order to get the prescription to buy the food, even if you were buying it somewhere else. These diets are not regulated by the FDA like drugs are. They did not have to endure rigorous safety and efficacy trials like drugs do. And the requirement of a prescription, though technically is legal, it's actually made up, it's not strictly necessary. Ask 10 veterinarians And I bet you get a generous majority could not correctly explain the FDA's role in pet food labeling, much less the legal issues surrounding therapeutic diet sales. For all we hear nutritionists talk about the very real dangers of misusing therapeutic diets, veterinarians have to take it on trust that the manufacturers are producing a safe and effective product. If those manufacturers can't prove safety and efficacy, why should they be allowed to enjoy the benefits of FDA labeling and veterinary-only distribution? If it's really about better protection for our pets, then we need the therapeutic diet manufacturers to step up and independently demonstrate that their diets actually work, they offer specific indications, and they provide evidence-based guidelines for safe and effective use. We're going to go through a few myths about prescription diets. Myth number 1, prescription pet foods need a prescription because they're just like medications. They're not like medications. They're supposed to show research that supports one or more of their ingredients' efficacy in the treatment of a condition or ailment. Some are not appropriate for long-term use as they're not 100% nutritionally balanced. Some of the low-fat or low-protein foods fall into that category. And you need to check with your veterinarian if your pet is prescribed a therapeutic prescription diet to find out if it is appropriate for long-term feeding. I've said in the past, I had a client whose dog died because the dog was prescribed RD, which is a reducing diet made by Hills, very restricted, has tons of fiber, very restricted calorically, because the dog was chubby. They kept the dog on the diet for a year. The dog died of malnutrition. Myth number 2, the FDA requires a written prescription before these foods can be sold. The FDA does not regulate therapeutic diets, just as it does not regulate nutraceuticals and vitamin supplements. Nevertheless, pet food companies require retailers to receive a written prescription from a veterinarian upon purchase. Why? It comes down to marketing and distribution of these diets. The therapeutic diet manufacturers want veterinarians to recommend their diets, but they know that veterinarians are unhappy when big box retailers and online pharmacies carry them. That's because veterinarians believe they might be implemented in lieu of veterinary care. If you had a cat with urinary tract disease and you could walk in and just buy that prescription diet without going to see your veterinarian, you might be tempted to just say, well, why would I go to the veterinarian? I don't need to go have that exam and urinalysis and spend $300. I'm just going to go buy the diet. There's some truth to that, in that you should have your sick animal seen by your veterinarian and have a diagnosis. But these diets are not providing anything that is solving anything. So that brings us to myth number 3, therapeutic diets can cure diseases. There are diets for liver, heart, skin, kidney, urinary tract, gastrointestinal, diabetes, bladder stones, arthritis, geriatric, brain health, joint health, just pancreatitis, you name it. But the diets are seldom used as a standalone treatment for any condition, and they are never considered a cure. Diets can only be used to help manage a condition. Myth number 4, you can only buy these foods at a veterinary hospital. Well, only a veterinarian can prescribe them, but that privilege doesn't extend to the sales. As long as you have the veterinarian's authorization, you can buy these at a lot of online places and also in big box stores. But a lot of those places only sell the most popular ones. So if yours is on one of the slightly weird diets that's not sold as much, you may have to get that ordered through your veterinarian. Myth number 5, there's only one brand of food for your pet's condition. That is so untrue. And they also do make diets for multiple problems. Let's say your dog has a skin problem, bladder stones, and gastrointestinal disease. Well, from a tcvm standpoint, we might go, hey, there's a lot of damp heat going on there. Why don't we drain damp and cool the body? They're not doing it that way. All right, myth number 6, there's no substitute for a standard commercial therapeutic diet. Wrong, 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 wrong. You can always find a home-cooked recipe for any condition. Owners with very specific food preferences can meet their personal dietary goals, looking for humanely raised meats, GMO-free, organic, limited ingredient. You can make your own diets for your pets. Going to require a little bit of work, going to require consulting with a nutritionist, but you do not have to use these prescription diets. And I actually had the New York Veterinary Medical Association come after me because on a social media online question and answer thing. I said that somebody did not have to use the veterinary prescribed dry prescription diet for their cat's urinary crystals. And they told me that I was prescribing and treating online for somebody's cat that I had never seen. Nope, I was just telling them the truth. They do not need to feed that diet, and it's absolutely the wrong diet for a cat with urinary crystals and urinary tract disease. For some conditions, there's also the option of adding supplements to commercial diets to make it equivalent to the veterinary recommended therapeutic diet. Joint formula foods, for example, are often based on standard formulas. They just add some more omega-3 fatty acids, some glucosamine and chondroitin for the joint support. Unfortunately, there's not enough in there to make a difference if you actually do the math. The brain diets that are out, they just added some MCT oil and some omega-3s. There's nothing magical there. It's still crap. A class action lawsuit was filed in California against several pet industry companies alleging they engaged in price fixing of prescription dog and cat food. This was back in 2016. The named defendants in this lawsuit, it was filed in California, were Mars Pet Care, Nestle Purina, Hill's Pet Nutrition, PetSmart, Banfield, and Blue Pearl Hospitals. The suit alleged that the pet diets in question contain no drugs or other substances that can't be found in conventional pet diets and therefore should not require a prescription from a veterinarian. The lawsuit further alleged that the defendants were colluding to market and sell pet food as prescription pet food to consumers at above market prices. If you've ever purchased one of these special diets for your pet, you know how expensive they are. So the lawsuit was filed in U.S. District Court of Northern California. The plaintiffs were pet owners who purchased prescription diets from one or more of the companies, and they asserted that they conspired with each other to falsely promote prescription pet food. The specific diets mentioned in the complaint include Hill's prescription diet, Purina Pro Plan veterinary diets, Royal Canin veterinary diet, IAMS veterinary formula. The complaint pointed out there's no reason for the foods to require a prescription since they contain no drug or other ingredient not commonly found in non-prescription pet diets. The lawsuit further alleged retail consumers, including plaintiffs, have overpaid and made purchases they otherwise would not have made on account of defendants' abuse and manipulation of the prescription requirement. At the time this was written, this was a couple years ago, Mars Pet Care is the largest supplier of pet food in the world. I believe that is still true. Nestle Purina Pet Care is in second, and Hill's Pet Nutrition is number 4. I think that's pretty close. PetSmart is the largest pet supply chain in the U.S. Banfield is the largest veterinary clinic chain. I'm not sure if that's still true. VCA might be bigger. And Blue Pearl is the largest veterinary specialty and emergency care chain. By the way, these are all circling around the Mars Pet Food Company. The lawsuit argues these companies abuse their position as the biggest players in the industry to promote prescription diets for dogs and cats. Veterinarians actually hand pet owners written prescriptions for a certain kind of pet food. The pet owners go to PetSmart or another location to purchase the prescribed food. These pet guardians, according to the complaint, are typical of people who consistently follow the advice and direction of medical professionals. You're such good pet owners, you listen and obey. However, the prescription dog and cat diets are not evaluated by the FDA because they don't contain drugs or other controlled substances. The case document stated that the American public reasonably expects a prescription requirement implies that a substance is medically necessary, contains a drug, medicine, or controlled ingredient, has been FDA evaluated, and legally requires a prescription. The plaintiffs allege that the prescription pet food does not meet those criteria. The lawsuit asserted that the prescription requirement allowed the defendants to market and sell prescription pet food at well above market prices that would not otherwise prevail in the absence of the prescription authorization. There are legitimate reasons why prescription diets for specific medical conditions should not be fed to healthy animals. Unfortunately, for many pet owners, they will feed other pets in the home the same prescription diet for convenience. If you're putting out a bowl of dry prescription food and that pet is not allowed to eat anything else, supposedly, according to your veterinarian, and you have another pet in the house, you're just going to put out the same food if you're feeding dry food and leaving it out because you don't want the one that needs the prescription to eat the non-prescription food. So your other animal is now eating the prescription diet. Well, what if your animal that's on the prescription diet is on a very, very low protein diet? It's an old animal with kidney disease, prescribed a low protein diet. Your other animal happens to be a young growing puppy, and you put out one dry food that's low in protein, low in phosphorus. Not good for the puppy. This becomes so confusing for pet owners because it's just difficult to navigate and you don't have enough information. The complaint further asserted that the positioning of the pet food as prescription is effective in part because all the defendants work together to promote it. The veterinary clinic defendants write the prescriptions for the food, which is made by the pet food company defendants and sold by the pet store defendant. A little bit of collusion going on. If your veterinarian is in the habit of recommending prescription pet food or for your dog or cat, please ask them for balanced homemade recipes instead. Otherwise, you're going to be spending a lot of money for poor quality pet food that will not improve your furry family member's health in the long run. A holistic or integrative veterinarian is going to be much more likely to be able to prescribe that for you, meaning a homemade recipe, versus your traditional veterinarian who, frankly, did not get enough education in veterinary school to know how to balance that diet unless they just think that this is a really fun thing to do and they take the time to learn how to do it. They also can buy software to do it. There are other companies now that are out there that are using human grade ingredients, that are using whole real foods. I didn't take the time to look up a long list of them, but I would encourage you, if your veterinarian says, oh, you need a prescription diet for XYZ, say, great. What company makes that using human grade whole food ingredients? Because that's where I want my prescription written, which, by the way, even for these companies, you still got to have that whole prescription thing. Because again, you don't want to just buy a low protein, low phosphorus food if you don't have an animal that truly needs that. In July 2017, the California District Court dismissed that lawsuit. But in July 2020, the California Appeals Court ruled the district court erred in dismissing this important lawsuit. Yay, a win for pet owners. Now, this is where I'm getting into stuff from Susan Thixton. It's a little bit long. The panel concluded that under the reasonable consumer test, plaintiffs sufficiently alleged that the sale of the prescription pet food exclusively through vets or with veterinary approval was a deceptive practice. In addition, the plaintiffs satisfied the heightened pleading standard for fraud because they alleged sufficient facts to show that prescription pet food and other pet food were not materially different. The market for prescription pet food had a slow rollout. Hills began selling its prescription diet pet food in the 1960s through veterinarians, and in the late 1980s began supplying veterinarians with prescription pads as part of its marketing effort. In 2004, when Hills became a significant player in the prescription pet food market, Mars introduced its own line of prescription pet food. At an unspecified time prior to 2012, Purina entered the prescription pet food market. Mars, Purina, and Hills, collectively the defendant manufacturers, have over 90% share of the U.S. prescription pet food market. And they're also the ones buying up veterinary clinics and employing 50,000 veterinarians in the U.S. So in September 2012, the U.S. FDA published for comment a draft compliance policy guide in which they noted there's been an increase in the number of pet food products labeled as intended for use in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease, as well as a shift in marketing toward pet owners directly. They expressed concerns that animal health may suffer from consumption of these products because they affect physiological processes to extents that may not be tolerated by all animals and or may not achieve effective treatment. However, they were less concerned when such dog and cat food products are marketed only through and used under the direction of a licensed veterinarian, because the agency presumed the veterinarian will provide direction to the pet owner. The FDA then proposed a set of 9 factors it would consider in determining whether to initiate enforcement action against pet food products. At that time, the defendant manufacturer's products violated 3 of the factors in the draft. First, the prescription pet food included indications of disease claims on the labels. Second, the distribution of promotional materials with disease claims were not limited to veterinary professionals. Third, they electronically disseminated promotional materials with disease claims to consumers on the internet. So they adopted a final guide in April of 2016, which was essentially the same but added 2 more conditions that could lead to enforcement action. The defendant manufacturers did not change their behavior despite violating the same 3 conditions. The FDA has not, however, taken any enforcement action against defendant manufacturers. In other words, Mars, Purina, and Hills defiantly ignored the FDA compliance policy guidance on prescription pet foods, and FDA sat back, did nothing, allowing prescription pet foods to violate guidance and mislead consumers. Luckily, this lawsuit challenges the validity of prescription pet food and alleges that the manufacturers conspired to charge high prices for, per federal law, adulterated and misbranded products. After learning that Hill's prescription pet food has no medicine or drug, that no prescription is legally required to purchase it, and that it is not tested and approved for medicinal purposes by the FDA, this person sued Hill's, alleging that Hill's and other pet food manufacturers conspired to monopolize the prescription pet food market and to artificially inflate prices by self-imposing the prescription requirement. So the FDA, Center for Veterinary Medicine's way with prescription pet food is to allow manufacturers to use food grade or feed grade ingredients, including ingredients sourced from diseased animals or non-slaughtered animals, those that have died from horrible things, and allows inferior feed grade manufacturing standards to make a product that claims to cure or treat a disease. Further, the FDA plays perfectly into the scam by requiring these unproven products to be sold only when prescribed by veterinarians. The prescription requirement does not make a product safe that is otherwise unsafe. It simply mitigates the harm that the food may cause due to the failure to gain FDA approval. For instance, Hill's produces a prescription pet food product called, and this is a couple years old, so these prices have changed, Prescription Diet Urinary Care CD Multicare Cat Food, sells for $5.62 a pound. And then they have the Adult Urinary Hairball Control that is sold over the counter for $3.51 a pound. I think we need to add like $2 or $3 to each of those at this point. The two products make essentially the same health claims and have a 75% overlap in ingredients. The non-overlapping ingredients are not drugs and are not sufficient to justify one product being sold by prescription for a significantly higher price. Given the overlap in ingredients and the absence of any drug or other ingredient required to be sold by prescription in the prescription product, the only meaningful distinction between the two products that is apparent to the plaintiffs and those similarly situated is the prescription requirement. The price differential is therefore based largely, if not entirely, on the prescription requirement imposed by Hill's and other manufacturing conspirators in the combination. Then we'll fast forward to February of 2019, and actually we'll fast forward to November 2nd, 2018, when 17 companies recalled pet foods, these were not all prescription, but recalled pet foods for excessive levels of vitamin D because they were excessive in the premix that all the different companies were using. So November 2nd, 2018, 17 companies recalled. Hill's, with their prescription diets, did not make their recalls until March 20th of 2019. November, December, January, February, March. 5 months of animals dying of kidney failure because they refused to recall. The lawsuit, there's a big class action on that one, which has been settled for $12.5 million, which is a drop in the bucket for the number of animals that were harmed or died. But several things that are claimed on the Hill's website that were absolutely not true. 1, we conduct final safety checks daily on every Hill's pet food product to help ensure the safety of your pet's food. 2, additionally, all finished products are physically inspected and tested for key nutrients prior to release to help ensure your pet gets a consistent product bag to bag. Well, if there was testing being done, they would have known that they had way too much vitamin D in there. And if they were on the up and up, they would have recalled their products when everybody else recalled their products instead of continuing to sell high-priced, prescription-only products for another 5 months while animals were dying. Wrap up. Prescription diets do not contain medications. They are made with the big companies that we're talking about, particularly the dry, the canned, are made with poor quality pet feed ingredients, waste products from the human pet food industry. They cost more than non-prescription diets with very similar ingredients. An example, brewer's rice is the first ingredient in one food from Hill's, which is $89 for a 25-pound bag. Brewer's rice is a waste product. That's the main ingredient in there. And it's $89 for a 25-pound bag. That's almost $4 a pound. No, that's over $4 a pound. It's $4.50, $4.25. Trying to do math in my head. They are not intended for long-term feeding, even though they are prescribed that way, and there are ongoing lawsuits with these. The ones that are prescribed, the hydrolyzed diets only work 50% of the time. They're prescribed for IBD, they're prescribed for allergies and dermatitis. They only work 50% of the time. I don't think they're ever worth wasting your money on. One of the products is hydrolyzed chicken feathers. Another is hydrolyzed soy. Another is hydrolyzed chicken. They do not warrant the purchase price of $100 a bag for stuff that is just absolutely not appropriate. So what to feed is human grade real food, whether you make it yourself or you buy it from one of these pet food companies that is supplying either raw or gently cooked in general, they're going to be somewhat smaller companies. There are so many of them out there. If you want to know the companies that we recommend, if you go to our website, sign up for the newsletter, you will instantly get an email back that gives you the list of foods that I would feed my pets. It's not an all-inclusive list of good companies that are out there. I don't have access to all the companies. You can also go to truthaboutpetfood.com, which is Susan Thixton's site. You can sign up for the list. In order to get on the list, pet food companies have to supply her with all of their receipts and invoices for all of the ingredients that go into their products. And then they have to be human grade. It has to be real food. No waste products can go in there. They have to show their supply chain of command for everything and how their manufacturing is done, that it's done in a human grade plant. So much has to go into that. And so she charges a small fee for the list. Absolutely worth it. And a new list comes out every year. So if you find a company that is on the list, know that they are good. Now, some of the newer companies may not be on the list yet because they haven't been around long enough to get themselves onto the list. I get the list every single year because I want to see who is new. And there are a lot of good companies. And so Jean says it can be hard to choose because there are so many good ones. And there are. So you want to look at what's most easily available for you to get. Like what's carried at your local independent pet store. If you're, sometimes we can do freeze dried with high quality ingredients, and that's easier to ship if you live in kind of a food desert and have to order something online. A lot of these companies you can go to, they will ship direct to you. Some of them ship nationwide, some of them ship only regionally, and so you need to look at that. And then you need to look at price points. What can you afford? This is definitely easier for people to get food that's pre-made. It's definitely easier for people with smaller dogs because the price points for human grade food are always going to be more than buying trash. When you're buying feed grade ingredients, which can include, animals that died otherwise than by slaughter, which means there can be euthanasia solution in there. Animals that were sick, that were down, animals that were rendered. When you're paying for those ingredients, it's much cheaper for that. If the diet that you're buying is 50% starchy carbs, that's cheap. Corn is much cheaper than meat. Rice, much cheaper than meat. Chicken is one of the cheapest proteins. So that's what you're going to see the majority of. But I strongly recommend the list. Pet food industry is very difficult to navigate for pet owners because it's overwhelming when you walk in the store and go, oh my gosh, particularly if you go to one of the big box stores. Like it's row after row after row, floor to ceiling. I will tell you, just keep right on walking past the mass manufactured dry kibbles. Just avoid those aisles. I'm not that thrilled with a lot of the canned foods. So, okay. Everyone have a wonderful weekend.